Well, thank you all for coming out for the second day of our Newsmakers Interview Series this week. I've had a good day already yesterday with Oz Guinness and have a pretty heavyweight lineup. Today is kind of a special doubleheader, beginning here with Tucker Carlson and later at 12:45 with Stuart Taylor Jr., a Supreme Court expert. I'm understanding that classes are in progress right now. We might see the crowd swell a little bit, but this is kind of an odd time for us this morning. But we really appreciate you being here, Tucker.
Oh, yeah.
As always, we're very thankful for Dr. Marvin Olasky for holding this incredible series. His body of work speaks for itself. He's the editor-in-chief of World Magazine, an accomplished journalist, scholar, academic leader, and author of more than 20 books and just hundreds of articles on a variety of topics. And his presence here in this series has just deeply enriched our campus community. Well, Tucker, great to have you here.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed watching you over the years, those crossfire sparring sessions. Were just great television. They really are. Tucker Carlson was born into a family with a journalistic bent. He's the oldest son of Richard Warner Carlson, a former Los Angeles news anchor and U.S. ambassador to the Seychelles. He began his journalism career as a member of the editorial staff of Policy Review, a national conservative journal, then published by the Heritage Foundation. And as a magazine and newspaper journalist, Carlson has reported from around the world. He's been a columnist for the New York Times and the Reader's Digest. He's written for Esquire, the Weekly Standard, and the New Republic. And he joined CNN as its youngest anchor ever and was soon appointed to be the co-host of Crossfire, where a lot of you probably first saw him. He always represented the political right and sometimes very heated daily jousts with antagonists from the left. During that same period, he hosted a weekly public affairs program on PBS called Tucker Carlson Unfiltered. He later hosted MSNBC's Tucker and also hosted an afternoon weekday wrap-up for MSNBC during the 2006 Winter Olympics, where you attempted to learn how to play various Olympic sports. He's been hired as a Fox News commentator. He's been a substitute host for Sean Hannity. And he also produced a Fox special titled Fighting for Our Children's Minds. He's co-authored a book entitled Politicians, Partisans, and Parasites, My Adventures in Cable News. And in 2006, he was a participant on ABC's Dancing with the Stars. Today, he serves as editor-in-chief of the political website, The Daily Caller. And it's our pleasure to welcome Tucker Carlson. Thank you. Give him a nice, warm applause.
So with all your background, both in writing articles for lots of different publications and then your television punditry work on CNN and MSNBC and PBS and now Fox, what's the difference between the thought process involved in writing a column as opposed to appearing on jousting on TV?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I guess they're both species of journalism, but they're more like third cousins than siblings, I would say. The process of writing forces you to think through what you're saying. I mean, writing is thinking, so by the end of a piece, especially a reported piece, I mean, you know an awful lot, or you think you know, you imagine you know an awful lot about the subject. Television puts a premium on crisper expressions. Really, the key talent in television, well, there are two key talents in television. One is not to be overawed by the medium. You can't be afraid. Fearful people don't do well on TV. Passion actually doesn't translate that well on television. It's a cool medium, as has been noted many times. And the second quality you want is the ability to sum things up crisply. And so the process of preparing for a TV show as a guest is the process of thinking through, you know, the 3 points that you would like to make and how does one distill them into, you know, a form that viewers can understand. And people don't listen carefully to television, I've decided. And they don't have a sense of irony or nuance or sarcasm. None of that translates at all in television. So it really is an irony-free medium. So you need to be very straightforward with what you think. no joking allowed. I mean, I one time was doing a show years ago, and somebody said, I have always had problems combing my hair. I'm not super self-aware, so my hair was sticking up or something, and somebody said, your hair's out of control, and I said, it's a wig. Joking.
Right.
I mean, what would be the point of wearing a wig and then telling people about it, right? I mean, the whole point of having a wig is the stealth involved. You're pretending you have hair, but you don't, so you wouldn't, spend $8,000 on a wig and then brag about it. So I didn't imagine anyone would take this seriously. We got, only 6,000 emails about it, all hostile. So I had to go on the air the next day and confess that, in fact, my hair is my own. But the point is, the mode of expression is so different. Print, you can carry off many layers. On TV, you can't.
Now, the Daily Caller, is it more like television or more like the New York Times? If we have the spectrum.
Boy, that's my choice.
That's your choice.
Gosh.
we have a spectrum from sensational to staid and boring.
Well, I would say the Times is pretty, as a lifelong daily New York Times reader, I would say it's a pretty sensationalistic publication. But, I mean, look, I like the tabloids. Mm-hmm. I like the New York Post. I read the New York Post every morning. The New York Post is not the highest tone publication in America, but I have 4 children, and I can tell you that range in age from 10 to 18, and a wife and 2 dogs, and all of them, with the exclusion of the dogs, read the New York Post every day. There's something for everybody.
What do the dogs read?
The dogs just sort of stare at the refrigerator. But the beauty of the New York Post is it doesn't presuppose that you have an obligation to read it. The Times arrives on your doorstep, and the right-hand column shouts at you, are you a decent person? Are you a good citizen? Are you smart? Then you will read me. The New York Post has no such pretensions. The New York Post knows that you are busy, you got a ton to do. You don't need to read the New York Post. They convince you to read the New York Post. And by the way, they also cover dwarf crime in a way nobody else does.
Well,
dwarves don't commit a ton of crimes, but when they do, the New York Post is there, blanket coverage. Anything from jaywalking to armed robbery, they are on it. So they have all kinds of, freak show stories, but they also have serious political coverage. That, to me, is a model. There are things about the paper I don't care for, but the thing that I take away from it is you need, in this busy moment in our history, to convince people that you are worth reading. And so I have no problem putting a lot of thought into our headlines, for example. How do we win readers? And we have been accused of going low in doing that. I'm not ashamed of it at all. At all. Nobody has an obligation to read your stories. I tell my reporters this all the time. We got 50 employees. I'm always lecturing them. Nobody has to read this. People are super busy. They've got jobs to do, families to raise, and you need to convince them that this is worth their time. So I would say we're a hybrid.
The typical thing in American journalism has been to start out sensationally, and then become more serious and sometimes stayed in the process. Joseph Pulitzer, William Rand, Hearst always stayed sensational. Pulitzer started out sensational and then got very serious to the point of offering, when he was dying, Pulitzer Prizes and so forth.
Right.
What's the future of the Daily Caller?
As a manner of atonement, by the way, which
sure.
didn't work, in my view. But, we are not sensational in the sense that our standards for accuracy are very high. They're as high as the New York Times.
Okay.
We don't get things wrong. The New York Post does. We don't.
Never?
We get things wrong unintentionally, but we care. When we get something wrong, we correct it immediately. We figure out why we got it wrong, which I think is a key part of the process. The after-action report. And one of the reasons the military is revered while every other institution in American life is reviled is they take seriously their afterthought. I mean, they think through why they did what they did, and especially when mistakes are made, they determine why and how, and we do the same. And then just on a very basic level, we spell people's names right. We think it's really important. We think spelling matters. We think ages and dates matter. So just the basic conventions of journalism we embrace pretty aggressively. What sets us apart is we don't, on our best days anyway, buy into the same dumb storylines. I mean, there are only 9 different narratives that the press by and large covers. And I think they're tired and in some cases misleading. They're certainly boring. I can't, you know what I mean?
What are the top 3?
Oh, I don't know. Private enterprise is bad. Big companies are evil. White people are racist. Whatever. I mean, you know what they are. And, there's probably some truth in all of those things because there's always truth at the bottom of every stereotype. But for the most part, they represent a very outdated view of what's happening in America. I mean, if you read the New York Times or the New Yorker or and I read them all, but any of the kind of old line, liberal, high quality organs, it's really like 1955 in America. I mean, America's biggest problem is white racism. Like, really? I mean, this country's just changed. I'm not trying to minimize white racism. I'm just saying the country has changed so much demographically and in its attitudes that's like a ludicrous assumption. And yet that underpins a lot of the political coverage, a lot of the crime coverage, et cetera, stuff like that. I mean, it's just dumb. So I want reporters who come at the news with a fresher take. I don't hire just conservatives. You can't. If we limited our hiring to just conservatives, we had like 4 people. Conservatives don't want to go into journalism by and large. They want to go make some money, or they want to go, I don't know what they want to do. They don't want to go into journalism. And they also don't want to run bookstores or open restaurants, which is why bookstores and restaurants are always run by liberals too.
And why don't conservatives want to go into journalism?
I haven't the faintest idea. Probably because it has a discredited odor. Probably because you have to, when you work in journalism, spend time around other journalists, and that's a pretty upsetting prospect. It's a pretty unattractive group, pretty annoying group, actually. So they don't want to deal with it. And they're also probably not keyed into the channels through which journalists rise up in the ranks. I mean, I could go on about this forever, but I'll just sum it up by saying, for all the talk of diversity in the newsroom, and if you've worked in newsrooms, it's like a huge topic. Diversity workshops and all this, it's crap. There's no diversity. Everybody, black, white, Hispanic, American, Indian, they all went to Princeton, they all grew up on the coast, they're all secular, they've never owned a gun, they don't go to church, they all for abortion. I mean, it's like everybody has exactly the same attitudes. So in the end, what your skin color is like immaterial. What really matters is your life experience and your attitudes and the culture that you're from. And so let me just put it this way. If the city staff of the New York Times went to Brigham Young, if everybody went to Brigham Young, would the paper be different? You think? So the problem is just this monochromatic, totally homogeneous group with the same worldview. And so they're not able to see all this other interesting stuff, all these cross-currents going on in America. Look, my goal is not, at least in my role as editor of the Daily Caller, is not to change the world. I'm not here to change the world. I'm not here to win a victory for conservatism. Sorry, I am conservative, very actually, and more as I get older. But my job is not to wage a political battle. There are tons of people doing that in the Congress. They don't need my help. My job is to cover the stories that are not being covered by the rest of the lazy, ideologically liberal press. And that's a pretty easy job, actually, because there's a ton of stuff to cover.
So you find reporters, you have about, 40 reporters? Is that?
Yeah, we've got about 50 employees, and probably a little over 30 of them on the editorial staff, reporters or editors.
And they don't come from Princeton?
We have a bunch of kids from Princeton, actually, and they're great. Turns out kids who go to Princeton are really smart. Sorry.
Okay,
so we do have some. We have 2. Right now we have 2 from Princeton, and I really like them both. But the point is not. I don't even care where you went to school. I make a point of hiring people who didn't go to college. I think often most people are not. Many people, let me just say, including myself, shouldn't have gone to college. I shouldn't have gone to college. I learned nothing. I was drunk the whole time. It didn't. It didn't add anything to me. I know this is a totally different environment, and thank God you're here. But college was a waste for me. I would have been much better off working in a newsroom as an apprentice, or working in a bank, or having real life experiences rather than just waiting around to become an adult. So I actually have zero interest in where people went to college. We have a number of people who didn't go or who dropped out. I don't care. It's a meritocracy. What I care about is your stories. Are they good or aren't they?
So you say liberal ideologues not allowed. You want curious people? That basically.
Absolutely. That goes without saying. I want curious and highly aggressive people. I want people with bad table manners. Okay? And we've got them. Trust me. So earlier this year, one of my reporters, our White House reporter, Neil Monroe, is a wonderful guy from Ireland, grew up during the Troubles, has a totally different view of everything. Of course, he's not American. And he's standing in the Rose Garden as the president's reading a statement about how he's changing our immigration policy unilaterally. It's kind of a big deal. And Monroe's waiting for the moment where you can ask questions, and it turns out you're not allowed to ask questions. The president's plan was just to get there, and he's on transmit, not on receive. It's like, shut up and listen and transcribe and report it. And my guy, after 20 years of being in the White House press corps, decided, you know what, I'm asking a question. I don't care whether you want me to or not. And he shouted a question to the president. Well, he was immediately leapt upon by his compatriots in the press corps. You're a heckler. Really? That's heckling? And my view was, and I was, of course, attacked, really attacked for it. And I defended him, needless to say. And my view was, and has never changed from this, we are not hiring wine stewards here, right? I don't hire people because they have excellent manners. I hire people who, what's that? Oh, gosh, now I'm revealing my biblical ignorance, but there's the moment in the Old Testament where the differences between men who drink water from their hands or stick their faces in the river.
Right. It's a Gideon story.
Thank you. I'm an Episcopalian, so some of this stuff's a little muddy for me. But exactly. I want the guys who drink water like animals, okay? I want people who are extremely aggressive, who do not care what other people think by and large. Why? Because they have just one job as far as I'm concerned, which is to ask people in authority who by definition are not interested in answering questions that they didn't write themselves, asking them difficult questions and getting the information. Period. That's our only job. And it turns out that a certain personality type is really good at that. And so we screen for that very carefully as we hire. It's very, very carefully. And I give them all the same lecture, which is, life is short, you will die. And at the end, if you are blessed enough to have a moment or two of reflection on your deathbed, here's what I can tell you. You will not remember a single easy job you ever had. No sinecure will come to mind. The only jobs you will recall are the ones that asked everything of you. And this is one of those jobs. You may not love it at every moment. We're going to pay you a terrible salary, like ridiculous. I'm not going to tell you we're going to pay you because it's laughable, okay? But we're going to give you all the Pop-Tarts you can eat. You can sleep in the office if you want, and we are going to work you like an animal. We are the Viet Cong. We're going to march 50 miles in truck tire sandals on a bowl of rice and sleep in a tree and get up the next morning and do it again, okay? This is an all-in commitment. And I would say about 70% of the people I interview are looking for the exit. They want to escape. But there's about maybe 8% who start vibrating like a tuning fork. Like, it's a dog whistle. They can hear it. They want the gig. And those are the people we hire. And it's been, it's worked.
Okay. Serious question here. What moment of reflection do you want to have on your deathbed?
I want my children to have become decent, squared-away citizens with good marriages. That's what I really want. I want, and this is not I would never, I hate even to say this because it sounds so treacly and phony and Oprah-ish, but I mean it with total sincerity. I have 4 kids, and I want my kids to be decent people, and I want them to have happy marriages. I think that's the most important thing.
And what are you doing as a parent to try to push them in that direction? In a subtle way, of course.
Living out a happy marriage in front of them, I guess would be the number one thing. I mean, I'm given to lecturing, in case you haven't noticed. And I once taught a course at GW for a semester, and I spoke for like 3 hours for these classes without stopping. And after like the first 20 minutes, I could tell no one was listening to me, but I couldn't really stop.
So speak louder.
Speak louder, exactly. And so I know that I am given to throwing out what I consider, nuggets of wisdom to my kids. I'm writing a book of like my advice to them. I'm a big advice giver, but in the end, I'm kind of skeptical. I do it because I'm a compulsive person and I can't stop myself. But in truth, I feel like that's not how people learn. Like, kids have pretty strong BS detectors. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If you're saying don't smoke and you're firing up a Camel, they're like, come on, that doesn't mean anything. Have a good marriage, do this, do that. It's just words. They don't, you know what I mean? But if they see you treating your wife well and she treating you well, and you have a marriage that is a source of strength and happiness in your life, and they're growing up around that, that's a powerful way to communicate a truth, it seems to me. So I'm not dodging your question. I think that's right. I think that's how kids learn.
So you grew up in an Episcopalian family? Basically.
Well, I was baptized in Episcopalian. One of my relatives was Episcopal Bishop of California, so I got baptized. But no, I grew up in basically a very secular family, to be honest with you. And I started dating when I was in 10th grade, I went to boarding school in New England, and I started from California where I grew up, and I started dating the daughter of the headmaster, who's an Episcopal priest. He was, she wasn't. And she was a very strong Christian, and so she, and still is, And I married her, by the way, to get the end of the story. And she really convinced me to, take a look at the possibility there was something beyond me. And I'm glad she did.
And what did that look lead to?
Well, I became convinced of God's existence, and actually I thought about actually becoming an Episcopal priest for a while. Glad I didn't. That would have been hell. But just because that church is so messed up. We still go to the Episcopal Church for all kinds of complicated reasons that I can't fully explain, but whatever. Obviously, I despise the Episcopal Church in a lot of ways. Truly despise the Episcopal Church, but anyway.
So yesterday's Washington Post had an article about the National Cathedral will have same-sex marriages in it and so forth.
It's not even, I don't even, if that was the extent of it, if I felt like the leadership of the Episcopal Church was really serious, they were serious people trying to divine God's will, and they had reached the conclusion that gay marriage was God's will, and I'm totally open to that argument. As I've just said, I'm very predisposed to marriage. So if it's a choice between, people living a life of, serial relationships and people living in a lifelong monogamous relationship, it's not a hard call for me. I'm totally for gay marriage, and that if that's the choice, I don't even care that much about that. I just think they're for gay marriage because it's trendy. Mm-hmm. It's like another way to express how hip they are, and they don't care at all what God thinks of it because they actually don't believe in God. They're not serious people. That's what I don't like about them. And then the fact that they sanction abortion is like, that's not a tough call. That's not like something that, you need to spend a lot of time thinking about. Are you joking? A church is for abortion? What?
Why are you against abortion?
Because it's killing a child. And I'm not a very sophisticated person in some ways. And I'm certainly not a theologian, and I actually don't like theology at all, to be totally honest about it. I think it's often a dead end, at least for me. So, there are all kinds of things. I'm not sure what to think about them. I'm not a particularly evolved person morally, but I'm not for killing kids. I can just say that. It's sort of my baseline. You know what I mean?
Taking a controversial stand.
Yeah, are drone attacks okay? I don't know. I'm wishy-washy. Is it okay to kill your kid? No, not okay. So, if you can't reach that conclusion, it's just not a tough one for me at all. And for a church to be in favor of killing children, it's just like that. That just blows my. And by the way, that gets no attention. We're all caught up in the gay thing. Who cares? I mean, I know the Bible's against homosexual acts. All right. What do you think Jesus thinks of abortion? I mean, are you joking? In the hierarchy of concerns, it's not even close, as far as I'm concerned. And by the way, so is divorce. As the child of divorce, I can say, that hurts kids, for real. Mm-hmm. I know, and I've seen it, and I've lived it. And so I'm not defending the gay rights movement, which I think is pretty awful by and large, but I am saying a disproportionate amount of energy goes to the gay marriage thing when I know a ton of Christians who've gotten divorced and screwed their kids up, and once you've done that, mm-hmm. you are not allowed to pass judgment on anyone else's marriage. So you just shut up. How's that? That's my feeling.
Okay, now, you said you and your family go to an Episcopalian church for all kinds of complicated reasons. Could you uncomplicate those a little bit for us? Or?
It's part of it's inertia. Part of it's we really like the people. Part of it's, to be totally blunt, these things have, cultural associations. That's the world you grew up in. These are the people you know. These are, I love the liturgy. I can recite it without looking at it. Dumb stuff like that. Am I going to defend that? No, it's totally indefensible. And I'm sure in a room full of serious Christians, you're like, well, you're kind of a shallow guy. Yep, I'm a shallow guy, for sure. That's why I still go to Episcopal Church. But I like it. I just don't want to think too much about my money going to these pompous, blowhard, pagan creeps who run the church.
And what do your kids think about those blowhard pagan creeps?
I think they're really turned off by them. My kids have gone to Episcopal schools, as I did. I went to Episcopal schools. My kids have gone their whole lives. And, I am saddened, and this is a real issue for my wife, who's very sincere, Bible study leader, religion teacher, a very sincere Christian. You can't look, and I would say this of most clergy, to be totally honest. 90% of the clergy I meet, I would not want my kids to grow up to be. My father-in-law is an exception to that. He's an Episcopal clergyman, as I said, and I would be happy if my kids grew up to be him. He's an honorable, decent man. But a lot of clergy I meet, and most of the clergy I meet are like in the political realm. They've come to Washington to lobby on this or that. If my kids grew up to be someone like that, I'd be horrified. And I think they feel the same way. So they show up at their school and like the chaplain is some, twice divorced, recovering alcoholic, 50-year-old woman who's like, talks about Hinduism exclusively. And my kids are like, you're a loser. And they're right. So it's sad. They don't have good models for the Christian life, at least in, like life in the clergy, I guess. Whereas they really do have good models for what it means to believe in God and like their mom, or their grandfather.
And who are their heroes?
Who are my kids' heroes? It's a great question. I don't know. I think their grandfather's one of their heroes, but I think both their grandfathers, actually. My dad and my wife's dad, I think they really think highly of them. They're both accomplished guys, and they're both good men who've lived really interesting lives. And I think my children really admire them. I hope they're nobody in pop culture. We really do our best to shield our kids from that.
Who are your heroes?
Garbage. My heroes are all writers. I love George Orwell. I always loved George Orwell. I love the almost shocking, like window pane clarity of his writing. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that the way you write reveals the way you think. And I think that people who write in an opaque way, which is almost everybody in academia, sorry, probably not here, but every other, either you have no idea what you're talking about and you're trying to hide that from your readers, or you're lying, right? I mean, you're hiding rather than exposing, and writing ought to be the process of exposing to light things you think are true. And Orwell was completely committed to that. A guy called George MacDonald Fraser, one of my all-time favorite writers, a very minor British writer who wrote a series of novels called the Flashman series, which I love, and a bunch of other books which I love. I love Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I've always loved Dietrich Bonhoeffer for his toughness and willingness to, look life right in the face and accept the consequences.
When you're interviewing
Martin Luther,
When you're interviewing reporters,
yeah,
potential reporters for jobs and so forth, what kinds of questions do you ask them?
I ask almost first, what do you read?
Okay.
I want to know what people read. This is we're in the words business, so I want to hire people who love words, who love to use words, who are interested in how they convey ideas, and who have a rich reading life. And so, like, I read the Washington Post and a series of news. That's not good enough. What books do you read? I always ask that. And I want to know where you're from. I want to know about your culture. I want to know, where did you grow up? I'm really interested in geography and towns, and I've traveled, like nonstop for 20 years, so I know a lot of places in the country. So I always ask a million questions about where you went to school, what your parents did, what your town was like, what people did for a living. I want to know where you come from, and I want to know, how that shaped you. I mostly am interested in the person. I want to know what kind of person this is, more than anything. And enthusiasm, of course, goes a long way with me. I mean, we hire people who are, we have a very high tolerance for weirdness. Mm-hmm. So we've hired people who are unemployable, basically, outside journalism. And that's one of the great things about journalism. It's like the French Foreign Legion. You can just show up, and like get a new passport. And as long as you can do the work, nobody cares where you came from. But I'm interested personally.
And how do you decide your stories? Do you have editorial conference meetings and stuff
Yeah.
like that? And give us a picture of what one of those meetings is like.
Well, we have an editorial meeting every day at 2:30. So we're an online-only publication. We have no print edition. And that seems obvious now. It'll be 3 years tomorrow. Anyway, but that's what we are. So a lot of online publications have like a virtual office where people write at home. I don't believe in it. We don't do that. Every person, with a couple of exceptions, we've got a couple people in different places, but the 95% of our staff works in Washington, and they all show up at 2:30. It's a compulsory meeting. They hate it. Tough. The main purpose of the meeting is to entertain me. I think that's an important function. I own this business with my college roommate. I want to be entertained, and I'm not joking even a tiny bit. And I am totally entertained. So everyone shows up at 2:30, and we go around the room, and I call on them, and you have to give an account of yourself. What are you working on? Entertain me. You know what I mean? If you can't get me going, and I'm interested in everything, and I'm like enthusiastic guy, if you can't, get me excited, then there's no chance you're going to move our readers at all. So we go around the room just like that. It's really simple. It lasts a half an hour. I try to keep it to a half an hour. But as I've noted a minute ago, I tend to go off on my theories about things. So sometimes it goes a little bit longer. They bring in their computers. I know that they are G-chatting each other nasty things about me. I don't care because it's highly amusing. So out of that comes, I think, a sense of what everyone else is working on. I know what everyone's working on, but more than that, it builds a culture. People get a sense of what we're about. And it's very hard to put that, when you start a company or start a publication, everyone's pressing you to write a mission statement. What are you for? How do we know? We want to write interesting stories that no one else is doing. Like, it's pretty much that simple. It's very hard to crystallize, to sum up in words what the culture of anything is. You know it when you see it. And our culture grows out of those meetings. And it was pretty intense. In addition to entertaining me, the other purpose was to create an office culture, and now we have one. And I would say it's very cohesive. All of our people are together on the weekends, and a lot of them are dating each other, and they're all friends, and they all spend New Year's together. And we've had 4 people quit for higher paying jobs and come back. So that says, I am bragging. I'm proud of that. And it says to me that we have a cohesive office, and I think that produces a better product in the end. I do.
So what do you think will be the biggest overall story this year, 2013, for you and in a sense for the country generally?
Well, the biggest story is, what do you do about the budget? Because you're bumping up against math, and math is impervious to election results.
And how do you make that entertaining?
It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. We've written a lot about it. We don't have too many editorials, but my business partner and I do write editorials probably whenever we get really grumpy. But it's one of those crises that can't go away, because math, again, just isn't subject to human interference. It's like it's baked into the fabric of the universe. 2 + 2 = 4, whether you want it to or not. And one of the things we know to be true on a physical level is that if you spend more than you bring in, ultimately you'll go bankrupt. I'm sorry, I don't want that to be true. It is. And so a government that is, $16.4 trillion in debt, and that's the official debt, which is only a fraction of the actual debt, as you know, because it doesn't include unfunded mandates, entitlement promises, it's like we're going under. So what are the practical ramifications of that? What's going to be cut? We are going to cut entitlements, in my opinion, because we have to. So what is that going to look like? So that's going to be a huge story. I think the gun story, of course, is an amazing and great story as far as I'm concerned. I'm a little bit too emotional on that subject, so it's hard for me to weigh in on it because it makes me so upset. I'm a Second Amendment advocate. So that'll be a big story. And I think the macro story is what it always is in the second term. It's the overreach of the reelected president. Mm-hmm. You get reelected, you decide that God has anointed you leader of the world, that your power is unlimited, you've got a mandate to do whatever you want, all your little theories and private obsessions, all of a sudden you think you can translate them into public policy, and you go too far. And these guys are already doing that, and there will be a wicked backlash. There always is. Bush did it. I don't know if any of you remember Bush's second inaugural speech. Do you remember this? In which he pledged not just to do this, that, and the other thing, but to, quote, end evil in the world. End evil in the world? Like, how's that for two, bread, milk, cigarettes, beer, end evil in the world? It's like, it's insane. Only a reelected president would say something like that. And I think Obama's hubris blows Bush's out of the water.
But he didn't try to end evil in the world through executive orders.
No, but I'm just saying the same grotesquely disproportionate sense of what you think you're capable of. And they all, look, I'm not even attacking anybody. I'm just saying, think about it. To run for president in the first place, to look in the mirror and say, out of 310 million Americans, I'm the most qualified to lead, you don't have a self-esteem problem in the first place, okay? Right. So these guys are already egomaniacs. Their whole lives have reinforced the notion that they're special and chosen, and they are special and chosen, by the way. It's inevitable that they overreach. And I think this guy, who's more prone to that, more prone to high self-regard than any person I've ever witnessed in my life, in any context, is going to overreach in a way that damages him. They all do, and he will, soon.
So in a couple minutes, we'll go to y'all for questions that we hope will entertain Tucker.
Yes, that's the most important thing.
But a couple of real serious questions. Number one, what did you learn from Dancing with the Stars?
Well, obviously the clearest lesson is never dance sober. That's a lesson I thought I knew. I am a teetotaler. I do not drink, and so that was not an option for me, so I probably shouldn't have done it in the first place. I did it because my wife bullied me into it. I got approached for the first season. I didn't even tell her about it. I said no, through my agent. I said, no way. Third season, I got approached. I told her at dinner, and she immediately latched onto it and said, well, I'd never seen the show. I don't watch television. She's like, well, it's a great show. You got to do this. Da, da, da. I said, there's just no way. And she goes, I'll never forget. She goes, quote, are you afraid? I would rob a liquor store. I'd jump off the bait. There's nothing I wouldn't do to disprove the allegation from my wife that I'm afraid. So, of course, I did. And I was afraid. I do live TV every day. I'm doing it today. Doesn't scare me at all. I don't even think about it. That show, I was in line, about to go on, like 2 minutes before going on. And I'm standing right backstage with this awesome football player guy whose name I can't remember, who won that season. And I'm standing there, and they're like, 2 minutes. And I had this fight or flight response, like, I can't do this. And I'm from California, so I know the geography pretty well. So I thought, I could be, or it's at Television City, and it's CBS Studios right on Beverly. And I was like, I could be in that car. I could be down La Cienega. I could be at LAX. I could be in Barbados in 6 hours. And I actually was like very close to running. That like trapped animal feeling. And I was standing next to this football player, again, who won the whole thing. I'll remember his name in a sec, but he's a running back. And he looked at me, and he'd clearly seen this kind of fear before. And he looks right at me, and he smiles. He goes, it's going to be okay. And it was like, that was like something from God. And I deflated. I felt so much better. And then I thought, you know what? I know I'll fail, and I did. But I'm going to enjoy the hell out of this, and I did.
All right. So second question. I see the last time I looked, you followed on Twitter 297 people, but you had 113,000 followers. Is that a status symbol to have?
I don't like Twitter. I don't really go on Twitter that much.
Well, you've last I looked, 1,119 tweets you've done.
Yeah, you'll see that every single one of those was sending out a link to one of our stories.
Okay.
So I'm not. My feeling about social media in general is we have a surfeit of information and of people's opinions. Okay, so I'm paid. It's my job to give my opinion, or one of my jobs anyway, and I don't have enough interesting opinions. Even though I'm in the opinion business and have been my whole adult life, I don't have enough of them to sustain a consistent Twitter feed. So I'm not being arrogant when I suggest that there's probably a lot of other people out there who don't have enough interesting opinions to sustain one either, and yet they go ahead and tweet all the time about their views on things. I just think there's something narcissistic about it. There's something almost delusional about it. You imagine there are people who care what you think. I almost never think there's anybody who cares what I think. Why would you care what I think? I'm not because I'm such a humble person. I'm not. I'm kind of an egomaniac in some ways, but I try to have some perspective. So like my tweets on, I think Obama's bad. I do think that, big time, but who cares? Who cares what I think? So I'm kind of against it. And actually living in a society where people imagine that their views are super, super interesting or their lives are super, super interesting for no real reason, there's something bad about it. There's something dangerous about that. Some people's lives really are super interesting, and they've done a ton of stuff. They've taken major risks, real risks, sometimes physical risks, which I admire always, and they have something to say. But, a lot of other people don't. They've been like, mortgage broker at Tyson's Corner. That's great, okay, but not that interesting. So let's get some perspective on what's interesting and what's not.
So just one other question. So, okay, you say you don't like reading theology, and you continue to go to the Episcopal Church for all kinds of community reasons, in a sense. How would you define yourself theologically?
Oh, I'm a Christian.
Okay, and what does that mean?
It means that I think that this isn't all there is, that there's a God. I know there's a God. I think that he sent Jesus to earth. I think that he passes judgment on behavior. Some things are wrong not just because we find them distasteful, but because God is against them. I think there's order in the universe. I think things happen for a reason. I think we won't know what that reason is until we die. I think there is very little justice in the world, and that people who say otherwise are dumb. There's no justice. Why are some people born with deformities and others aren't? I mean, it's just like it's basically an unfair world we live in, and the reason for that is not knowable by humans in this temporal world. This is my opinion. And we will know. I believe there is a reason for that. A lot of things that don't make sense will make sense. And I also believe that history is moving in a certain direction. I don't know what that direction is, but I think it's linear, not cyclical. I mean, these are pretty conventional views.
Unknowable or semi-knowable in terms of?
Hard to know. I don't know, I guess is what I shouldn't make. Maybe other people do know.
I'm just wondering, I mean, when you read the Bible, what do you get from that?
Well, it's funny. When you read the Bible, I've read the Bible a couple times through, and my reactions are always not at all what I thought they would be. I mean, what's my reaction to the New Testament, for example? Okay. Well, last time I read it, to be totally blunt, I still don't understand the coyness on Jesus' part. I don't. Maybe I should read more theology. Maybe I would understand. I think that's central to understanding who Jesus is, but I don't fully get it. Why not just say, yes, I am God in flesh, and, pay attention. There's a very evasive quality to his answers. And I don't understand that. It doesn't diminish my faith, but it does baffle me. But again, I'm okay with not knowing everything, because I think, and this is central to my politics too, I think there are always going to be a lot of unresolved problems in this life. I think that people have less power than they think they do. I think there are real limits on wisdom and human decision-making. And basically, I think our world is truly imperfect and will never be anything but that. I'm not attacking the world. I think I have a more realistic sense of what's possible in this life because of my faith in God. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more we could talk about, but I suspect there are questions out here. Who wants to?
Watching you on Crossfire during that season of life, it was entertaining. It was also very hard to watch at times. It seemed like that show was sort of a front runner to a wave of commentary that was very divisive, politically, partisan politics that maybe even kind of reflected the gridlock that we see today in Congress. I just want to ask you, did you enjoy that give and take and that sometimes combative battle that it looked like?
Well, it's a compound question. I will try to give a very short answer. I would say it was not a forerunner of or precursor to, as you said. It was the last gasp of a certain format that has never been revived. And that is, there are many things about Crossfire I hated, and I quit the show before it ended, for whatever it's worth, because I couldn't handle it anymore. But the one thing I will say in defense of Crossfire is it was the last show that had evenly matched hosts. And there was something very fair about that. It wasn't, the smart, impressive, handsome guy and his retarded sidekick. I'm serious. It wasn't just, the big head staring into the screen telling you what the truth is. Everything you said was challenged by a peer. And it forced you to be tighter and faster and smarter and more thoughtful. At its best, it did that. Now, unfortunately, the show was changed by a producer, really an idiot, who was in charge of the show. Still has a high-level position at CNN. And it went from being basically an ideological show when I first started hosting it, where people with differing views would debate those views, which is totally legitimate and needed, actually. We need more of that in this country, not less, to a partisan show where you had people just arguing on behalf of a political party. And I didn't fit that because I've never been interested in the Republican Party. I don't care anything about the Republican Party. I mostly vote Republican because I don't have a choice, because they come closest to representing me, but I care about the ideas, right? I'm not going to defend if the Republican Party invaded Poland, I'm not going to defend them. So we had partisan Democrats who would just like defend anything the Democrats did. And that was just dumb. Partisanship is dumb. It's for dumb people. My team is right, yours is wrong. Huh? It's not a debate. This is two people barking at each other. So I was very frustrated with that, and added to that was the fact that the guys I was debating were my friends. In real life, I was really like close friends with one of the guys, and actually both guys in the end. I really liked them. And you don't want to have bitter debates with your friends. You know, it was just a poisonous atmosphere. But there was also a real attempt to like shut us down on the grounds that, it's bad for people to debate politics or debate ideas. Really, why? Why is debate bad? So I guess, people got their wish. Now we have a television landscape where there's no real debate at all, or very little real debate. And I don't think we benefited from that at all. I think it's worth being confronted with ideas you disagree with. And wherever I'm in places where everybody thinks the same thing politically, I have noticed that the people are unimpressive on the subject of politics. I work in New York on the weekends. Upper West Side of New York, there's not one conservative. You listen to people talk about politics, they're moronic, because their own views have never been challenged in a meaningful way. It's just an amen chorus. You go to Waco, Texas, everyone's conservative. Not that smart, actually, on the subject of politics, because no one disagrees. You want to put yourself in situations where smart people are challenging everything you say. And if you don't have the stones to put yourself in that situation, you should probably be quiet on the subject of politics. That's my personal feeling. And you should, by the way, be grateful to have your views sharpened against the whetstone of informed views coming at you from another perspective. Like, why wouldn't you want that? You should want that.
Other questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
If a Patrick Henry College student came to you for a job, or any other inexperienced journalist, what would be the one thing you would want to hear from them, and what would be the worst thing they could say in the interview?
The one thing I would want to hear from them is, I'm really interested in finding out I've got this bizarre mic on, hold on, let me fix this. I'm really interested in finding out what's going on. I have a lot of energy. I'm interested in energy. And I really feel like I give the "we're all going to die" speech to all of our interns and everybody I interview for a job, and they think I'm morbid. I think the knowledge of your impending death is the single most important thing to keep in mind in your life. It's the root of all wisdom. This ends. It's what gives life its poignancy, its sweetness. It's what makes life worth living, the fact that it concludes. And it's also what informs, or should inform, your posture at work. I don't have much time here. Let's get going. And anybody who doesn't have that attitude cannot work for me, period. So that's just how I would sum it up. We're all going to die. Rejoice.
What you were saying a couple of minutes ago about opinions, I think had a lot of profundity, not only for you in the media, but for us here in the academic world. The kind of ubiquitousness of opinions everywhere. The fact that people can voice opinions without any real responsibility. We can have opinions, and if they harm people, we can change our opinions, and they don't cost us anything. What can we do here in the academic world to elevate the status, the level of debate in the media? What can we do? I mean, of course, you're always drawing upon experts from the academic world or the mainstream. What could we do at a conservative Christian college? How could we contribute to elevating the quality of debate in the media?
Such a great question. I would say by training your students to use reason and to insist upon clarity of expression. Ideas, it's the tree falls in the forest thing. They don't mean anything unless they can be successfully conveyed to other people. And I find a lot of people, not just young people, but people in general, even smart people, have a very difficult time orally or in written form expressing what they think. And that is a shame, because that means those ideas, some of which are valid and deserve to be heard, are locked inside people. So training people to make crisp, declarative statements in support of an argument. I mean, the one thing I actually think it starts on the level of grammar. That's my personal view. I'm not any kind of, grammar expert, but I'm interested in grammar, and I think it informs how we think, not just how we express ourselves. So I push my guys to get rid of the adjectives. They're clutter. We have the largest language in the history of language. There are more words in English than any other language ever. We have like this endless palette, and the key to it, verbs. Verbs drive sentences. So when I worked at a newspaper, I had an editor who was a brilliant guy called Paul Greenberg, and a wonderful man too. And he used to, from the day I started till the day I left, a year and a half later, he forbade me to use the verb to be. Try writing, 750 words without using is, are, am. Really hard. But his point was, we have all these verbs. Why using the most boring, least descriptive one? Put some energy into your sentences. And so energetic sentences convey energetic ideas. They suggest that you've thought it through. So I guess here's what I'm saying. To force people to use words intentionally, that was really the lesson I've realized 20 years hence of that exercise, was to force me to think through every sentence, not just to produce word loaf. In conclusion, I'm not saying people should go to prison for using that phrase, but they should be warned about the possibility of going to prison if they continue to use it. But that and a million other phrases that don't actually mean anything. Think through every word you are using. Why is it there? What are you trying to say? I'm just coaching my own child, through the college essay process. And again, it's hard because it's your own child, so you can't bark at them like you would as an editor at work, but what are you trying to say? Have you thought through what the point is? Who cares how you say? I find people write backwards. They're like, what are the right words to use? Who cares? What's the point? Get a grip on what the point is, and the writing will follow. Anyway, be intentional in how you speak. That would be my one piece of advice to people.
Should people go to prison for using passive construction?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? Yes! And I'm not for the death penalty because I don't think not because I'm such a good person, because I don't like the government killing people, except in self-defense, but I would consider it for passive construction because it's that offensive to me.
I spent one night in the penitentiary at Louisiana State Prison in Angola.
Whoa.
as a reporter, and there was a drug dealer next to me, and a murderer on the other side, and then 2 cells down was a person who used the passive. So anyway, please.
That's fair.
And by the way, I should tell you, the warden of that prison is a conservative, and there are televisions outside every 3rd cell or so, and always 24/7 turned to Fox News for the prisoners. So anyway.
Because the ladies of Fox.
So, go ahead.
Thank you for being here. This goes back to a little bit of what you were talking about with Dr. Olasky towards the end of your initial talk. You've talked a lot about things pertaining to Christianity, Christianity explicitly, the Bible, that sort of stuff. Just to kind of go a little deeper there, Jesus and the writings subsequent of his teachings, pretty much turned the world upside down, not by saying, I'm from God, I have good teachings, but
right.
that, I am the Son of God, and this is the Word of God. Would you ascribe to that? Just some of the things you said about the Episcopal Church, and that kind of makes me curious. Like, where do you stand on, the deity of Christ, the inerrancy of the Bible, those sorts of things?
Well, I believe in the deity of Christ. I mean, of course. I think that's kind of the definition of Christianity. And do I understand it? No, not at all. Do I think it's the key to the whole deal? Yes. Do I care about debates like transubstantiation? No. I don't. I mean, maybe I'll be convicted that I should, but I don't at this stage. The inerrancy of the Bible? No, I don't believe in the inerrancy. I mean, I think, I guess it depends what you mean by that. Do I think God produced the Bible? Yes, I do. Do I think it's the way we know God primarily? Yes, I do. I'm not comfortable with, people get way too legalistic on some stuff for my personal taste, and seem to miss the point. often using the text to do that. People are prone to that. The Pharisees were prone to that. We're prone to that. So I just think that's something to watch out for. But when people start ignoring what it says, like wholesale, that makes me really uncomfortable. That's what's happened in the Episcopal Church. And they ignore it not because they've found some new theology that they really believe in, but because they just don't care, because it's inconvenient. So that at that point, what's the point? I don't want to get to bed on Sunday morning. I could go for a run or have breakfast with my kids or do things that I like to do. Why would you go to a church where people don't really believe any of it? And I mean, this is an obvious point, and that's why mainline Christianity, Protestantism anyway, is in collapse, to be replaced by more, vigorous and vibrant and sincere forms of Christianity. It's why America's in collapse, to be replaced by India and China, because, they mean it. We don't. Whatever. It's a cycle of life.
Hi. It seems like in public discourse right now, people seem to be more interested in winning arguments, very combative types of public discourse. Where is the place for persuasion in public discourse? And is there, on the other side, a place for winning, arguing in a polemical way to win an argument? Where do they overlap, and which is more important for you as a journalist?
Well, it depends. I mean, I've got a couple of different jobs, as I said, so it depends on the gig. But, I mean, for the purposes of the Daily Caller, as I've said, I want to put up interesting stories that aren't running elsewhere. I think the cumulative effect of those will be to tell the truth about America that's not being told in the Washington Post, so it has, I guess, some ideological effect. That's not my goal. As someone who debates politics on TV, I actually think there's very little persuasion and very little debate that takes place in public. I see a battle of bumper stickers. And I hope you can tell that I don't consider myself like a deep person, and I'm certainly not an intellectual. So it's not like I'm the only smart person who's making a real case. I'm not saying that at all, or getting holier than that at all, which I hate. However, most people I watch on television don't even try to persuade anyone. We're right, you're wrong. It's so dumb. It's unbelievably dumb. And I think about the capacity of persuasion to work. I was pro-choice completely when I was a kid. Why wouldn't you be? I've always had libertarian tendencies. The idea of the government telling people what to do with their bodies, that made total sense to me. No, I'm against that. And it was only when someone sat me down and was like, really? Think through what abortion is. I had never done that, ever. I had just bought the normal line. Why wouldn't you, right? All things being equal, you would be pro-choice, of course, because their argument just on the face of it makes more sense. It takes someone sitting you down and saying, really, let's talk it through just for 5 minutes. Think through the consequences of what you're saying. And at the end, you will find yourself with in my view, if you're a person who's truly open-minded, a person of good faith, it's impossible to reach any conclusion but that this is horrifying. I can't believe this happens here. And that's the conclusion I reach. The point is, you can change someone's mind. My mind has changed all the time. I'm not kidding. I really want to be a guy whose mind is capable of being changed. I really want that for myself. And it is. I was always for the death penalty. And then as I got older, there was something creepy, troubling to me about the pretending surrounding the death penalty. Why are they dressing up as doctors when they're killing the guy? Why are they putting on surgical robes and why can't he have a cigarette before they kill him? Because it hurts his health. They're pretending this is a hospital. They're killing the guy. And so whenever people are pretending, going to great lengths to pretend something is not happening, to me that's a loud bell. Whoa, stop. Something bad here is going on. Anyway, I was persuaded by someone that, maybe there is something kind of wrong with this. I'm not trying to win you over to my view on that. I'm merely saying that it is worth convincing people of things. And I watch the contemporary Republican Party spends no time trying to convince anybody of anything. It's Reagan was great. We genuflect before the Reagan statue. Huh? That's not persuasive. I'm for Reagan. I love Reagan, but that's not persuasive in the slightest. That just seems like hero worship to me. It's meaningless. Name an airport after him. Okay, that doesn't convince me that the tax code is too progressive. Tell me why it's a bad thing to soak the rich when I'm not rich. Why is that a bad thing? They've spent no time telling me that at all. I mean, I have my own views because I've debated this stuff for so long. But the average person, even the average conservative, is I don't know, taxes aren't going up on me. Why should I be against that exactly? They have no frame of reference. They have no way even to think about it because the arguments have never been presented to them, ever, except in the dumbest partisan terms. And those terms, like, you can't even remember them after a while because they're meaningless.
Well, I think we need to stop. And perhaps if a couple of questions just informally afterwards.
Sure. I got a conference call at noon. I would love to hang around. I really like your coffee and buy a sweatshirt, but I got to split at noon, so I'm really sorry. But thank you for coming out and listening to me rant. It's pretty early by my standards. By journalism standards, it's like 4 in the morning, so I'm sorry if I ranted like a crazy person, but thank you for indulging me.
So,